Red Feather presents From the Archives. Chapter 32, Gone Fishing, Deals with the Devil.
Well, this is interesting. I thought this was one statement at first, but it looks like it's actually two. And Etho just stapled the transcripts together for some reason. So I'm going to read this top one first, and then record the other one separately, to make sure things don't get confused. Statement of... initials again. And I can't even play Mumbo this time. Statement of XB crafted regarding his roommate's business dealings. Original statement transcribed February 1st, 2009. Statement begins. Alright, so what I'm doing here is a little trick called getting out ahead of the story. Just in case Hypno comes in here to tattle on me after what happened. I just want to give my side of things before he comes in and does something stupid. Okay? I knew Hypno for a year or two before we decided to move in together. It wasn't like a huge decision. I was just having trouble making rent where I was at and needed to move, and I knew he was looking to move across town too, so it sort of just made sense. He worked days and I worked nights. I'm a janitor. I work at an aquarium. So I was figuring we wouldn't see much of each other anyways, which was perfectly fine with me. I'm a private guy, you know? I like my alone time. Well, because we had opposite schedules, it took me a while to notice anything. Hypno was I guess the word is reseller. Like he'd buy old stuff and refurbish it, or have other people refurbish it, and then sell it for a profit. Furniture, mostly, but also cars, jewellery, any kind of thing he thought people would pay good money for if it was just a little shinier. It wasn't so much a business as like 5 simultaneous side hustles, but he seemed to handle all the different threads of it pretty well, and from what I saw he made a pretty decent profit off all of it. Like, he wasn't exactly rich, but he definitely made more money than I did. For the first few months, that was that. I left him alone, and he left me alone, and I didn't notice anything too out of the ordinary. I didn't see any of his customers or anything. He usually made house calls, and if he did anything in the apartment, it was when I was either sleeping or out. Never thought anything of it. The place where I work is closed Sundays, so generally I do a lot of sleeping after I get home Sunday morning, and then wake up early Monday and spend the day doing stuff that requires me to be awake at normal human hours. Normally I run errands and then go for a nice long walk, usually down to the coast for some time in the sun and water. Well, one week I got home from errands to drop some groceries off, and there was somebody in the living room arguing with Hypno. Nobody I knew, but he seemed really upset. Neither of them had noticed me. I tend to move pretty quietly, so I hung back in the doorway and listened. The stranger was accusing Hypno of scamming him. Like, tricking him into overpaying for something. At least from what I could tell. And Hypno was saying no, the terms were clear from the start. He had, I guess, a contract, or a bill of sale or something, that the guy had signed, and he was holding it up. The stranger, the customer, had such a miserable look on his face when he looked at that piece of paper. Like he'd never made a worse mistake in his life than signing it. Hypno was facing away from me, and I could see he had his free hand behind his back. His fingers were crossed. Eventually, the guy gave up, stormed out right past me, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Hypno turned to watch him go, and that was the first time he noticed I was there, I think, because he sort of startled. It took him a minute to get his face back under control. He looked really unsettled, but after a moment he was smiling at me, it was almost sort of guilty. Like he knew he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't have. He said hi to me, sounded a little nervous about it, and said he hadn't been expecting me to come home so soon. I said grocery shopping had been faster than usual, set my stuff down on the counter, finally, and asked what that had been all about. He sort of shrugged, said he'd sold the guy a car, and the guy hadn't read the fine print, missed the interest rates. I said he'd seemed pretty upset over interest rates, and Hypno sort of laughed it off. Like, some people, you know? I asked him if his customer interactions went like that often. Played it like I was worried about people wrecking up the apartment if they got too heated in there. 'Cause, like, up to that point, I'd been under the impression that his little business was pretty low-key. Uncontroversial. Like, I knew he marked stuff up, but it was hard for me to picture him doing anything a person would get angry enough to scream at him over. He said now and then people just couldn't handle getting the short end of a deal, but that I didn't have to worry about it. He said he had it all under control. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like people only ever say that when they don't have anything under control at all. So I let the subject drop, but I had no plans of leaving it alone. I wanted to know what he was up to. It was actually pretty easy for me to start keeping closer tabs on him, because like I said, I was usually just asleep in the other room when he was meeting people. All I had to do was set a little alarm for myself in the morning, and then crack my door open to listen in on what was going on in the living room. It meant not sleeping, but I was curious. And I've never really needed that much sleep on a daily basis anyways. For the next week or so, I eavesdropped whenever Hypno was doing meetings, and I started realizing that whatever he was selling, it wasn't just cars or jewelry. He would promise people things. Sometimes it really was just normal things, a certain ring or an antique clock. But other times it would be things like a memory. I remember standing there, just behind the door, and listening to this girl bargain with him for the memory of the only time she'd met her grandfather. Or a second chance, love, someone's safety, things that aren't tangible, things that can't be bought and sold. Sometimes he got paid in money, but a lot of times he would barter. More than anything, he wanted them to sign those little pieces of paper. He just called them IOUs. I just kept watching, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for everything to come together in a way that made it all make sense. And then one of his customers died. I only learned about it by chance. I was flipping through a newspaper somebody had abandoned on a bench at the aquarium, and I recognized his face in the obituaries. The man who'd been upset about the interest rates on his car, according to Hypno. It said he'd died prematurely. Natural causes, even though he was barely 30. And I knew, I can't tell you how, but I knew Hypno and his scraps of paper had something to do with it. There's probably a lot of stuff I would have let him get away with. I've been around the block a couple times, and not a lot gets to me. If he was just fleecing these people the normal way, it would have been whatever, you know? It's a dog-eat-dog world. We all do what we gotta do to stay alive. But this wasn't that. It just tasted rotten to me. At the very least, it wasn't anything I wanted happening in my living room. It was raining hard that morning when I got off work. I walked home and caught Hypno as he was eating breakfast, and dropped the newspaper on the counter in front of him. I told him we needed to talk. He tried to brush it off, act like he didn't know what I meant, but I could tell right away he knew exactly what I was talking about. His eyes went to the obituary right away. I couldn't really read his expression, but it seemed scared, almost. I suggested we go for a little walk, and after a moment, he agreed. There's a walk I take at least once a week, usually more. There was an old saltwater river course that used to run right through where the city is now, before people really settled down here and started building. It dried up when all the sand got moved around, but the oldest roads still wind around where it was, and I like following the path of it all the way down to the sea. It was still raining as we walked, and Hypno told me about what he'd been up to. He said it had gotten sort of out of hand, that he'd just picked up a few tricks when he was first starting out with his business, and one thing had led to another, and before he knew it, he was way out of his depth. He didn't know how to stop now that he'd started, he said. He'd built a clientele. Everybody knew he could sell you whatever you wanted, so long as you were desperate enough to pay. All it would cost was your lifespan, or your memories, or your health. He told me he had more years on his life now than he knew what to do with. That he hadn't thought things through, hadn't done the math. And now he was probably going to outlive everybody he knew 10 times over. He didn't sound happy about it. We reached the ocean, eventually. I told him I'd make a deal with him. He'd stop buying things from people that they couldn't afford to sell, and in exchange, I'd stick around and keep him company. It took some work, but he agreed once I convinced him I was good for it. We shook on it. And, that's most of the important stuff. Everything to do with Hypno, at least. There's more to the whole story, but it's really a different story, and not one I feel like telling. If Hypno comes in here, nothing I can do about that. He will, or he won't. But at least I got my side down in writing first.
From the Archives is a fanfic series written by Johnny 16th Days and Zephaniah Grains, inspired by the Magnus Archives and by Hermitcraft and other Minecraft series. This chapter was performed by Tizzy S. Green. Editing for this episode was done by Butterscotch Bread and Maxie. Music was composed by Noctude. Thanks for listening.